Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 57 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, here live on LinkedIn. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Justin Fitzpatrick, who is the CEO over at DueDil. On this show this morning, we're going to be talking about what DueDil is doing to support businesses during this crisis, London as a fintech ecosystem, and what strategy really means as a VC-backed business. So, good morning, Justin. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning, David. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, we were chatting a second ago. Last time me and you were talking was in the 11FS office, and it roughly feels like about 1,000 years ago now, doesn't it? It's kind of bizarre.
It does. I think it was actually 4.5 months ago, but a lot has obviously changed between now and then. So yeah, we're in a new reality now.
We sure are. As always, guys who are watching this over on LinkedIn, we love getting your questions. So if you've got any questions as we're going through, drop them in the sidebar. We'll just weave them into the conversation as we go. For anybody who doesn't know about DueDil, can you start off by just giving us a bit of a background on you guys? I mean, when you started, what the mission is, and your role, obviously, particularly in making it a success.
Yeah, absolutely. So DueDil is about 9 years old now. So we've actually been on the block for some time. And when my co-founder and I started DueDil, we saw an opportunity in the market that we thought not only had great business potential, but also great social potential. And that was, I think, really one of the things that drew me to DueDil. And specifically, it was that for a long time, you came from a sort of banking and finance background. You could get whatever information you want on a universe of public companies. That information is incredibly accessible, incredibly transparent. There's all kinds of powerful tools that you can use to interrogate it, manipulate it, and ultimately understand what's going on with those businesses. And at the time that we started DueDil, we realized that there was a huge gap for a similar type of platform targeted at private companies. And as you know the stats, small businesses make up 99.9% of the economy, are responsible for more than 50% of employment and GDP. And so that just felt like a real sort of oversight that nobody was really tackling this problem. Naively, we sort of went headfirst into it and then realized that the reason nobody was tackling it was because it's incredibly difficult. So I think that our youthful exuberance probably was got the better of us. But I'm really glad that we took the steps that we did, because ultimately what we're trying to do is tell the story behind every business, not just public companies.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting market as well, like you say, in terms of being able to do that and do that in a way that actually you can show real benefit to those businesses in a short period of time. Personally, I've had experience implementing DueDil with some of the work that we've done at 11FS, and I've always been really impressed, not only in terms of the technology, but actually the team, and actually working really closely with the team. So, I mean, it feels like a very culture-driven organization, which I'm always a big fan of.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's not something that happens overnight. We've had to work at it, and like a lot of businesses, it's not a straight line to success. You sort of go through ups and downs and take a few wrong turns. But I think one of the reasons why we're so proud of our team and our business and our product is that we've stuck with it. And so I think what we've built today is really a testament to the goodwill of everybody who's been a part of DueDil, not just in the team now, but in the past as well, and our determination to just really sort of stick with this challenge, because we're very motivated by not just building a great product and having great relationships with our clients, but ultimately doing something that has some societal benefit.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, it's a great driver for getting people up every day and keeping people motivated, isn't it? It makes it a very different thing. It's not just about a job. It's not just about the paycheck. It's about being in a situation where you're materially making a difference, isn't it? And as you said, I mean, obviously during this period, everything that's happening with COVID, everything that's happening with coronavirus. I mean, businesses need support in much more and much more different ways during this period than ever really before. So, I mean, how have you guys been through this crisis? How are you coping?
Yeah. So I think first thing, I think we're coping quite well, and I'm both proud and feel very fortunate that we're obviously in a segment of the market that has been relatively insulated from the effects of coronavirus. I mean, we've kind of had some people in our team fall ill, but overall, because our team tends to skew quite young and healthy, we've sort of managed to get through that with relatively few scrapes. And I think because of the emphasis that the government has placed on supporting small business, obviously as an enabler of the small business economy, we've benefited from that. But there inevitably have been some challenges along the way, just in terms of people transitioning to remote working. I think our approach through this period has been to just try and be really upfront and transparent with people, and step up the communication, and not just the the sort of frequency of the communication, but also start to sort of mix up the medium, because the way that we were connecting with one another in the office is obviously not possible, and so we've had to introduce some new ways of making sure that the team stays connected, and that if we have a member of the team who's sitting in a one-bedroom flat in the middle of London, that they don't feel overly isolated, and we're doing what we can to make sure that they know that they're still very much a part of what we're doing. But in terms of our response as a business, I think to the overall economic crisis that we faced as a result of the health crisis that we faced. We noticed that early on there were a lot of people in the market sort of coming out with messages saying we're here to support, and I think that's wonderful to sort of state your availability, but we felt like we had to do a little bit more, particularly given the role that we had in the market, and so we didn't actually go out straight away with the "we're here to support" message on LinkedIn. We wanted to really come from a place of being product led. And so we did a few things in the course of the early stages of the crisis to really provide things of substance, tools that people in the market could use. So the first thing that we did was we released a CBILS eligibility endpoint for our API. There were a couple things that were put out early to help businesses assess their eligibility for programs like CBILS. But what we heard from a lot of our clients, who are lenders, banks, alternative finance providers, was that they were just being inundated with applications. And in some cases, some of the prospects we were speaking with in particular didn't really have the systems at the time to cope with that volume. And so the idea behind the CBILS eligibility endpoint was that we could give them a way of very quickly doing a preliminary assessment of whether that business was eligible, which would help them better use their time and resources, but also better use the time and resources of the business, so that they're not going through some drawn out application process only to find that they don't qualify. So there were things like that. We also did a COVID impact barometer, which some people have seen, really looking at the economy of the whole, but as a whole. But I think that our strategy through this was really to make sure we were doing things that had real tangible benefit for people that were being affected.
Well, like you say, when you've got that expertise, it's how can your expertise be used to help people during this period, isn't it? There's a lot of people who have done, I think, lots of things that are really admirable in terms of food banks and all different. But I think when you've got real specific expertise, and obviously this problem affects SMEs, then how do you use that most effectively? But it's been super interesting to see as well. I think as you say, the impact of organizations sort of coming together during this period, and everything that is really sort of born out of that. I'm hoping some good relationships have been sort of fostered through this period of really people finding out how those things can come together. But how about you personally? How have you sort of coped with remote working being the default?
Yeah, so I have to admit, before all of this, I was not a big work from home guy. I liked being in the office. I liked being close to the team and working directly with people in that environment. And I also, frankly, just like the kind of mental separation between my work life and my home life. But I'm in a fortunate position where we've got an extra bedroom, and so I've sort of commandeered this and turned it into my office. And actually, my family and I have sort of settled into a routine where, I come up here at 8 in the morning, I close the door, and this is the new normal. And so for me, it's been fine. I think, there is another kind of silver lining here for both me personally and the business as a whole. I think we've really proven to ourselves that remote working and having a distributed organization is an option. Before, work from home was something that was kind of an exception, and we accommodated people with it and sort of left it to their judgment. If they felt they needed to work from home, they could work from home. But the majority of the people by default in our team would tend to show up to the office because they like being in the office. And I still think that when we return, whenever that is, we will still have a majority of people in the office. But I think there's going to be a lot more fluidity between people moving from work from home mode and kind of remote working mode and in office mode. And I think we'll start to see a real distinction between coming into the office for the type of work that is conducive to being done in the office, and then kind of withdrawing home to maybe bear down on a few things and focus and be more productive. So that's been great. And I've also gotten 12 hours of my life back where I'm not commuting and I'm spending that time with my kids. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, it's there are some small benefits there, isn't there, in terms of, like you say, a lot more time at home is fantastic, isn't it? But that delineation is interesting, isn't it? I mean, how have you found? Obviously, I mean, you guys have been helping lots of other companies, but obviously you're leading yours through this crisis. I mean, being a CEO of a business in isolation. I mean, I've said to a few people, I feel slightly like a general who's about 300 miles behind where the war is taking place. It feels slightly remote in terms of what's happening. So being able to motivate a team, being able to sort of connect with people is different in this period, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard sometimes because, you recognize that there are limits to what you can do in during this time. We have some people in our team who, as I said, live in 1-bedroom flats in the middle of London, are quite isolated. And you can send out the gift boxes and make sure they have comfortable chairs and desks and things so that they have a good work from home environment. But the thing that they're probably really lacking is that in-person contact that they, and that energy that they feed off in the office environment. And unfortunately, that, you just can't replace that. And so, again, we've tried to, recognizing some of the limitations, we've tried to be creative in how we, bring the team together. We've done little things like, in our office, we hold tea rounds once every week, and on Thursday at 3 p.m. And it's sort of, my tip of the hat to kind of quaint English tradition. We do a tea round in the afternoon, but we've made those now virtual and allowed people to sort of pick which rooms they drop into, and rather than it being the whole company, you'll find yourself in a room with 4 sort of random colleagues that maybe you wouldn't have spoken with otherwise. So we've made these sorts of little adaptations as we've gone along, and again, tried to mix up, the not just the frequency of the communication, but also the mode of communication to reach people in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a question over on LinkedIn. So Bhavin Shaw, have you learned new ways of communicating? I mean, particularly looking at impact on culture, because I mean, we were saying this before we went live a little bit. It's different to anything that I've ever really experienced, because you don't really know what the end is. I remember going into this at the beginning, me talking to 11FS, it's like, we're going into a winter and we don't know how long this winter is going to last.
Yeah.
And it's almost the unending nature of this that is really difficult, I think, for some people to kind of grasp, isn't there? Because there's
Yeah.
almost a false hope every week that it might be the week that everything gets back to normal, and I don't know, we wake up and it was all a dream, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've, I'm sure you've seen this make the rounds, but there's what's known as the Stockdale paradox, and James Stockdale was a naval fighter pilot during the Vietnam War who was shot down and taken prisoner at the Hanoi Hilton, and the Stockdale paradox basically looks at mental resiliency, and he was obviously and others were in a very quite dire situation, but the observation was that basically the optimists don't make it because they're sitting there thinking they're going to be home by Christmas. The pessimists don't make it because they feel like there's no end to this and it's hopeless, and so you have to kind of maintain this delicate balance with reality, and be quite sober about it, I think, where you recognize that we're in this period, and we don't know how long it's going to last, but we do know it's going to end at some point. And so it's about building that mindset and that resiliency where you can kind of make your way through it. I think one thing that we've tried to do as a leadership team in the business is kind of take some decisions proactively, even if they're not necessarily the decisions that people are particularly excited about. So, rather than kind of waking up every day going, oh, is this going to be the day that we all go back to work? We've just said to people, look, we have a five-phase reopening plan. We're going to prioritize the people in the team who have a demonstrated need to kind of get back into the office earlier than others and can do so safely because they don't need to, take public transport. But, basically plan on working from home, through September. And, the earliest that we're seeing ourselves get back into the office, with any kind of regularity is October at this point. We'll reassess that in September, and it may need to be extended. But, at least by saying that, people can kind of mentally bookmark it and say, okay, I need to, I'm going to be here through the summer. So what do I need to do to prepare myself for that? And I think, that's been quite, even though, obviously not everybody's happy about only going back to the office in, September, October, I think they've appreciated the clarity and the proactivity.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like to say it changes the mindset, doesn't it? I think, like I say, I think in that principle, it's I think the perfect combination was a optimistic pessimist, I think was the one. So if you face into reality, but you try and make the best of it, that's probably the best you can hope for at this period, isn't it? But
exactly.
I mean, obviously, a question for you over on LinkedIn from Dan Feeney. Why did you guys choose London as a HQ? I mean, you guys are an international business, right? You're doing business in lots of different places. The London draw is still quite interesting. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, my personal story is I found myself in the UK, not entirely by accident, but I came here for grad school, expecting to stay 2 years, and that was 11 years ago, and I now have an English wife and 2 kids with funny accents. So, you sort of life goes in different directions. But I think, London, for us as a business and for me personally, quite quickly became an obvious choice. And, I was very involved with establishing Innovate Finance back in, 2014. And I think that, one of the things that, I saw, and some of the other people in the industry saw at the time, was that London as a fintech hub in particular has a really unique set of ingredients. It's one of the few cities in the world where you've got a commercial center, a regulatory center, and a talent and creative center all in the same place. And so I think it's really that combination of deep talent pools, both technical and creative, an overarching regulatory framework that is generally pretty coherent and consistent, and a large financial market and end market for customers. And so there aren't many other cities in the world that can claim that. And so what Innovate Finance has done, and I think has done quite well, is along with all of the other fintech businesses that obviously make up the ecosystem, is really showcase that unique combination of ingredients and turned it into something where the sum is greater than the parts. So as we sort of go through these various crises, whether it's COVID or Brexit or anything else, I hope, and I'm hopeful that London will continue to hold on to its strengths and develop them.
Mm. Yeah, like you say, it is a real challenge, isn't it? I mean, with everything that's happening here, and we're seeing organizations unfortunately not make it through this period. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see whether that bounce back can happen. But I guess as you said, really the dawn of this sort of revolution when it came to fintech came out of the financial crisis, really, from 2000 onwards. So, I mean, I'm pretty hopeful. I don't think everybody. I don't think the sort of ecosystem, the scene will look the same, but I think it will come out stronger. I think there are many organizations that I think during this period are almost sort of tightening up a little bit in terms of actually how they act and how they interact with the market. So I'm very hopeful. I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things specifically that gives me hope is, as you said, there's, we're going through this great period of volatility, but, volatility always creates opportunity. And, the thing that I'm really encouraged by is just the level of engagement at all levels within our business, within society. You can point to multiple examples now where emotions are running high, and we have to sort of keep that in check and make sure that it's put to productive use. But you can't deny the level of enthusiasm and engagement and appetite for change. And so I think if we can continue to harness that in a constructive way, then my bet is that as you say, we're going to emerge stronger from this.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, as you say, there are some silver linings, aren't there, from COVID? I mean, the sad reality is, as you sort of say, we'll get through COVID, and then we've got to start talking about Brexit again, haven't we? Unfortunately, but because that's not quite done. But I think there definitely are some silver linings in this, like you say, in terms of working practices, working processes, spending more time with the family. I mean, what will you take from this period, do you think, in terms of, I guess, not just the working practices at the office, but I mean, for you personally as a leader, it feels like we're all having to connect and having to think a lot more about people, which is probably a great thing in the long run, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this period has provided us all with an opportunity for reflection in terms of what's important, and that has put the spotlight back on relationships at home, relationships in the office. So I think on the personal side, that's been a real silver lining. I think on the business side, people are also starting to realize that a lot of the things that, we and you at 11FS have been talking about for the last few years in terms of the importance of digital transformation and providing digitally native experiences and, leveraging technology in a way to provide products that are, better, safer, less expensive, provide more choice. That I think people are kind of seeing now that, if you don't do that, then you're not really going to have a business, because it's not, there's an element of it, which again is about sort of having a business model that is resilient and efficient, and, meeting customer expectations. But, the market has kind of moved, I think, already. And for the organizations that aren't, kind of stepping in line with the trend, I think it's going to be a very, very difficult, transition for them in the future.
Yeah, there's a comment over on LinkedIn by Jane G, who says, how have you overcome the barriers to technology adoption where enforcement is low, so the bank's desire to stop financial crime is limited? But actually, I mean, at that stage, though, to your point, I mean, the whole of this period of time, lockdown, COVID, it is moving people towards this, and not just as a good idea, but overnight that they have to do these things. So, I mean, it does feel like there have been lots of people looking at experimentation or ways of doing improvement. But now we're talking about digital not being optional, but the mandatory channel of choice by nearly everybody.
Yes.
And actually, that for me, the whole industry swings towards products like yourself and the digital agenda much more broadly, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And as with anything, you have there are a wave of there's a wave of adoption, and depending on the size of the organization and the culture of the organization, there are some barriers that you need to overcome in the beginning. But I think the business case for this is undeniable. I think that not just within the organization, but within the market as a whole, because this is what customers are coming to expect as, the default position, as you say. So, there's always a little bit of inertia within particularly large organizations. And frankly, I've got a lot of sympathy for it, because it's a difficult thing if you're, running a large, complex organization that, is maybe coping with a technology stack that you didn't choose and predated you by decades in some cases. Those are hard problems to unpick. But again, I see great evidence that the willingness is there within organizations of all sizes to embrace this, and so it's really just a matter of time from my perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's competition, consumers now having choice. All of these things create kind of a different level of expectation. It feels like actually fintech over the last 5 years or so within the UK, I think has reset where people's level of expectation actually is for what good customer experience is, or what they expect from their bank. So and long may that last, I have to say, because as we say, digital banking is only 1% finished, right? There's a hell of a long journey on this stuff still to go. But Justin, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up, because we're coming to the top of the hour, and we know everybody has a lot of busy things to go and get on with this morning. So thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find out a little bit more about you and DueDil?
Yeah, David, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation. If people would like to find out more about me, they can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Fitzpatrick. And if they'd like to find out more about DueDil and what we're up to, they can visit www.duedil.com.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you again for joining me. Tomorrow, we have a really interesting show. I think I'm probably letting myself in for some punishment here, because we're back tomorrow with the 11FS chairman, Sean Meadows. So come watch me talk to my boss for half an hour. It's going to be very entertaining, I think. That's all we have for you today. We'll see you same place, same time tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. Goodbye.